So they use basically most of their money in purchasing art. And they came up here to visit some friends of theirs in the 1950s. They built this home and they keep collecting art. And people got attracted by the collection. And people knocked on the door and said, can we see the group of 7? And school groups start to show up with school buses and say, can I come in? So in 1964, they decided to leave a legacy. They didn't have any children, so they want to do something for the province. So they signed an agreement to donate the land, the house, and all the artwork to the province of Ontario. So in 1965, it officially opened, and the original set of artwork was 194 pieces. And but now we have over 6,500 pieces of artwork. We have over 100,000 pieces of innerwear drawings we're custodians for. So we basically grow 10 times the original size. And also we have hiking trails. We have different hiking trails, but be careful because some of the trails just loop around the gallery. But we do have one that connects with the Humboldt River Trail that doesn't loop around. I do know people that when they go hiking, they never turn around. So you may be in trouble because you may either be in Lake Ontario or Lake Simcoe. So that's one of the.
Yeah. Is that the famous portage route that goes from Lake Ontario to Lake Simcoe?
Yeah, you can connect different hiking trails to hike there. I was told by this particular father and son that was what they were doing. So yeah, so be careful when you hike around here. And in the summertime, sometimes we have tour outside too, but we don't do it in the winter because it's kind of dangerous. And we have conservation area that we grow concentrate growing native Ontario plants as well. So a very interesting place. People consider this as the spiritual home for the group of 7. Because I don't know whether, we have a cemetery. The cemetery is like 6 out of 7 of the founding members of the group of 7 are buried here. Some of them with their spouses. So, and Mrs. McMichael were also buried here. So in the next room, who are here to see group of 7? Now I want to ask this question because there are people come all the way from New York or all over America to see this. And this is a very interesting place because this is Gallery 1 and all the artwork in Gallery 1 actually come from our own vault. And it comes from the original 194 pieces of artwork. So let's go in here. Group of 7, bear with me because you're going to hopefully learn something about the group of 7. Lauren Harris, a member of the group of 7, he was actually a very special painter for me personally because I find his style changed the most throughout his career. And he was also a little bit different from the other members of the group of 7. And of course, just some background information, just in case just to remind you. The group of 7, they were a group of painters that painted around 1910s, 20s, 30s, and around the First World War and the Second World War period. And they were famous for painting landscape, Canadian landscape, raw, wild, and rugged. The way that when you look out the window, you go, that's what I'm seeing. Because they were all educated in Europe, they were academically trained to be painters, but they were saying, oh, look at the English, a very neat and tidy pastoral kind of style. It's not Canadian landscape. Or look at the impressions, and oh no, it's not the kind of pastel color doesn't apply to Canadian landscape. So they use very broad brush strokes, they use very vibrant colors, and they portray the landscape of Canada as wild and rugged, as what we see every day when you look out the window. And but when they came out, they were not well received. They were considered as rebels. And people actually made comments that if you want to paint like a group of 7, it's very easy. You set up an easel, open a can of paint, throw it to the canvas, there you go, there's a group of 7. So they were not well received. And of course, as time goes by, we are embracing group of 7 artwork, and some people even suggested that the Canadian national identity is tied into the group of 7 landscape paintings. Because to be honest, like we have people come from all different parts of the world, but one thing that we have in common, which was the weather, right? Just like today, you have to drive here, it's all the treachery of the ice and snow and things like that. So the spirit of the landscape painting is very much tied into the national identity, which in a way there was what the group of 7 painters embraced. Now, why did I start with Lauren Harris here? Now, this is called Montreal River. Now, there's a story behind this painting. I think some of you asked me, how did the collection of McMichael came to be what we have now? I'm sorry, I apologize. That door is crazy sensitive. So come closer and stand together, closer together. So I'm talking back in the 1950s. I told some of you earlier on, Mr. and Mrs. McMichael were very much into collecting art. But they were not multimillionaires. They had a small business. They had a house in downtown Toronto and a house up here in Kleyburg. And so when they want to buy art, they go to talk to dealers. And eventually, they became very good friends with a group of 7, many members of them, and directly purchased the artwork from them. So this particular one, they said, okay, I want to buy the first painting. I want to buy a group of 7 paintings. So this was actually the first painting purchased by Mr. and Mrs. McMichael back in the 1950s. And we don't talk about money in the gallery because of obvious reasons we're not selling them. And just give you an idea, in the 1950s, they went to the dealer and they want to buy this painting, and they were told it cost them $250, and they didn't have that much money. So they negotiated with the dealers to put them on installment plan, $50 a month for 5 months to pay for this painting. So that was how, give you an idea of the kind of people they are. And of course, then whenever they have money, they would go and buy paintings, and there were stories written about him, about them, went up to the Fine Art Museum in Montreal. At that time, one of the group of 7 painter, Arthur Lismer, was the director of education up there. And there was story, they would sit down with Arthur Lismer and say, can you show me what you've got? And Arthur Lismer would say, okay, this is what I've got, what do you like? And they say, okay, 175. And they said, I got one last week. I'm not quite sure I like that one. Can I come and trade? Or can you put them on installment plan? So this is how the original artwork came to be. And of course, later on became a public gallery. Then we have like sponsors, we have fundraisers, so we have donors, and we still have donors. We still have people, artists want to donate their work, or the collectors want to donate their work. But it's not that easy. We have no idea how many people call us every day. So I have something to do on it. And we don't always want it because it has to match with our mandates. It has to match with authenticated first and have to match with our mandates. So this is basically the process which it came to be such a big collection. So go back to Lauren Harris. This is a very classic composition by the group of 7. You see the front, the foreground, sometimes with rocks, sometimes with a little bit of land, sometimes with trees. And then the middle ground, you have the water. The background, you have the mountain and the sky, and over again, it's a very classic composition. And with the focal point being the trees over here. And at this point, Lauren Harris very much embraced colors. So he used a lot of sinuous line, very art nouveau in a way. And it was very popular in the art movement at that time. And art movement with all this S-shape, cast irons, and all the colors. So he was using it over here. And but his style did not stop there, and keep kind of changing. So if you walk down here, this is also by Lauren Harris, and a little bit of background I forgot to mention. I mentioned to you all the group of 7 painters. They were academically trained in Europe to be painters, including Lauren Harris. And but Lauren Harris actually received his education in Berlin, and. But he, unlike the other members of the group of 7 people, they all were commercial painters. And there were very practical reasons behind, because they could not make a living being an academic painter. So they work in commercial firms, tried to make a living, and the weekend went out to Algonquin Park to paint. Lauren Harris belonged to the Massey Harris enterprise. They manufacture agricultural machineries. They were multi-millionaires, the 2 families. So he didn't have to work. However, he had such a generous spirit. He became a mentor and also a financial supporter for a lot of artists, not only at Group of 7. And his style changed the most I mentioned earlier. So from that over to the snowscape here, you see this actually is also very decorative and reminds you of some of the shape of Art Nouveau. However, you will see the color is also very innovative. And you see that for the group of 7, snow is never boring. It always has a lot of color on it. And this painting was actually inspired by a Scandinavian exhibition. He went down with J.H. McDonald to Buffalo to see in 1913. So you see that it was like they went down and said they looked at the Scandinavian landscape. They said, oh, that's what our landscape looked like. So they came back and created a whole bunch of paintings like that. And this is Mount Robson. You see the style change. Can you feel the style is a little bit different? Right? And now this is the story behind this particular change of style, actually some reason behind. Now something happened in 1913, of course, a traumatic event in the world, World War I, right? And so at that time, many group of 7 members, they actually they enlist during that time to participate in that event. And Tom Thompson didn't actually go. Now, brother Tom Thompson, I want to ask you a question. Is Tom Thompson a member of the Group of Seven? No. Why is that? That's good enough answer for me. Tom Thompson, it's a trick question because you can say yes and no and I will agree with you. And the reason why is because the group was officially formed in 1920, the Group of Seven. And that's why in 2020, because next year is celebrating the centenary forming of the group. It's a big celebration, big exhibition of Group of Seven, just stay tuned. But the group was formed in 1920 and Tom Thompson died in 1917. So he was not officially a member of the Group of Seven, but if you go out and try to say Tom Thompson is not a member of the Group of Seven, I think you'll get a very hard time with most of the people. Because he's still considered as a very inspirational member of the Group of Seven. He shared an apartment with A.Y. Jackson, another member of the Group of Seven at one point. He worked under the oldest member of the Group of Seven, J.H. McDonald, under the same commercial firm. He was a very good friend of Lauren Harris. He went for canoe trips with Arthur Lismer. So all these connections make him a member of the Group of Seven. The second question I want to ask you, how many members are there in the Group of Seven? People that follow me can answer. 9? No, that's a very good guess. Somebody guessed 8 earlier on. Actually, I'm not going to tell you right now, but I'm going to let you know how many later on. So when people say that there's Group of Seven, it's because there's 7 founding members of the Group of Seven. 7 of them found the group when they formed in 1920. But doesn't mean that it's the end of the membership. Okay, I'll tell you later. So Lord Harris actually did go overseas to fight during World War I, but his only brother and his best friend actually went overseas and died. Douglas Harris actually died during World War I in Europe. So when after the end of the war, and Lauren Harris became very depressed, and he actually went through a nervous breakdown. He didn't paint for a whole year. So after he came back, and also another news at that time, when the war ended in 1918, of course he learned that his very best friend, Tom Thompson, died in Algonquin Park. So he went through a very hard time trying to recover. And he said, I can't go back to Algonquin Park to paint because he called it, that's Tom's land, right? It belongs to Tom Thompson. So he went up to Lake Superior. And A.Y. Jackson actually said that at that time, when Lauren Harris, sorry, I got distracted very easily. When Lauren Harris actually went up to Lake Superior, where was his choice of place, and actually at the Algoma region as well, that he actually found a very new style. And this is a particular style they were talking about. Now look at the landscape compared to the earlier one. It's not as decorative as that, and it's very geometrical. And also the kind of color that he used is very simple. It's just blue, brown, and a little bit of gold and white. Now some art historians try to speculate, why did he change his style and what it means? Now, Lauren Harris is very much into the transcendentalism and theosophy, was very popular at that time when he was at university, turn of the century or 20th century. So this biocentric, this kind of, we are all connected, the same energy of living organism. He very much embraced that. For theosophy, they believe that you don't have to go to a religious place to worship. In order to find God, you just have to go to nature. And so some art historians saying that, I get it now, look at this painting. What does it remind you of? Look at these mountains. What does it remind you of? I want to tie it to kind of cathedrals, steeples, right? Churches. And so a lot of people say maybe prayer hands, maybe something has very spiritual feeling to it. But of course, Lauren Harris actually made a statement saying that don't try to decipher my paintings because painting is an organic experience. So you basically stand here and look at the painting and come up with whatever you want to. And that's why when any tours that you can speak up because there's no right or wrong answers, right? And I used to do school groups and have little kids sitting on the ground and I try to bring up the same religious and this kind of talking to the kids. But 95% of the time when I said, what does it remind you of? Like, come on, right? And 95% of the time they will say, it reminds me of ice cream, it reminds me of dessert. First form and people just gave him all his name, Rebels was one of them. And so they didn't actually sell anything and their exhibition was being criticized. And Frank Johnson actually became the only member of the group that was more well received at that time. And when you look at Frank Johnson's work and compare to the other 7 work. And you can actually kind of see back in the 1910, 1920s, and you will say, oh, I can see what he was painting. There was some depth to it, and you can see that it was like layers of trees, and it's very much like the forest that I walked every day. So he was more well received. And at that time, and after the exhibition with Group 7, he started selling his artwork at the Simpson Tower. For those, anybody remember Simpson Towers? Yeah. So basically, he sold his artwork at the decoration department at the Simpsons Tower. So somebody would go and say, okay, I'll get that couch, that coffee table, and this painting home. So he sold really well and made a lot of money. And eventually he went to Winnipeg and became a teacher there. So he said, okay, and I'm working well and I'm making money, so I'm just going to quit the group. So now the 7 founding members of the group of 7, Frank Johnson said, I quit. So now there's a space open. And that space being replaced by somebody else, and I'm going to tell you later on who was that. Do you know why?
Two different painters, same age.
Sorry?
They're there at the same time, two painters?
That's a good guess, but no. It's a good guess. What's that?
They go, because if they painted it there, they didn't paint on such a big canvas, they paint that one first and then paint it on a bigger canvas after.
Exactly. So when you go out there and say, what are the group of 7 famous for? The group of 7 were famous for painting en plein air. Basically, try to imagine in the 1910s, 1920s, we don't have like fleece jacket or anything. They were wearing their tweed suits, they were wearing the leather shoes, they have the toolbox with them. They basically hike all over Algonquin Park to paint. So they would stop right in front of them at a scenery that captured their attention. Then they ripped out their toolbox, they have the tallets, they have the tools, they have their brushes, and they would have a board, something like that size. Very practical, right? Because they can't really carry this at the back when they hike. So they have a sketch that size, they ripped out the sketch, and they would use oil paint, which was their choice of medium, and sketch right in front of the scenery. And for a lot of people, the sketches were more immediate and more intimate because of the way that they painted. And do you want to make a guess how long, on average, for the group of 7 to paint a sketch? Outdoor? Think about Canada wilderness, very cold.
2 hours.
2 hours? Very good guess. Half an hour. So on average, it's half an hour. So they hike and then they paint, but they can only do it 9 months out of 12 months for obvious reason. I don't think they want to go out like in December or January. So some of these sketches get worked up to the big canvas that size. So we have names for them. The small one called sketches, the big one called canvases. And to give you the example, in Tom Thompson's lifetime, he painted over 550 sketches, and only 32 of them worked up to the big canvas like that. So a lot of people consider, for the group of 7, the sketches actually encapsulate the spirit of Canadian landscape. Actually, Arthur Listener, I didn't ever give you his name. Arthur, what's a friend? Oh, I get confused right now. So this was actually Carmichael. Yeah, Franklin Carmichael. Now you can walk all the way down, and these were also done by Franklin Carmichael. And these actually paintings, he was actually our directors, our CEO decided to paint them. I think it was partial. But Franklin Carmichael was also a commercial artist. He was as passionate about watercolor and oil paint as the other 7 members. And you'll see that, you see a little bit of sign of that. Now, I told you the 7 members, right? Now, how many members can you recall? 7 founding members, including Lauren Harris, Franklin Carmichael, Frank Johnson. Now, Frank Johnson left the group, so his place was replaced by somebody else. And his place was replaced by A.J. Cassidy. So A.J. Cassidy is considered by some people to be the youngest founding member of the group of 7. It was a bit confusing because he was actually the 8th member of the group of 7. And he worked under Franklin Carmichael in the same commercial firm, and they were very good friends. He was invited to join the group. So now how many we have? 8?
9.
And yeah, very good. Pay attention. 8 plus Tom Thompson is 9. But that's not the end. And in this part, I just want to briefly introduce to you another member of the group of 7, A.Y. Jackson. A.Y. Jackson, as Lauren Harris, also an officer during World War I, but he was not like Lauren Harris. He actually went overseas to fight. He went to France to fight after actually a painting trip with Tom Thompson. Now, somebody asked, why did Tom Thompson go to fight and with the military during World War I. The reason why was because he was already 36 years of age. He was a little bit older than the other members, so he didn't go. But A.Y. Jackson went up to Montreal, where he was from, and he went overseas. Now, he was a Quebec painter, as you can see from the sketches there on my right-hand side. So you see some of the sketches done by him of the Quebec, the rural Quebec. But this particular painting is especially valuable because he came back during World War I after an injury. He went overseas in France, he was injured. He took one bullet on his shoulder, another bullet on his hip, and so it took him 16 months of convalescing in London before he completely recovered. And he went back to Europe after that, not as a soldier, but as a painter. He became a war artist, which was what they were doing during World War I, mainly artists from the UK, but he participated in that as he was actually I think the first Canadian painter to become a war artist. So he painted a lot of war art, and if you go to the War Museum in Ottawa, you probably will have a chance to see all of them. But he was very true to the spirit of the landscape artist. His war art was never about blood, bomb, blowing up, things like that. He always portrayed war, landscape, as the land, the desolation of the land left behind after the action. So this is actually very much similar to the war art that he painted, even though this is not technically, because he painted that in 1919. It's called First Snow Algoma. But somebody say that once again, art historian can have this. I said, look at it. Is it actually snow? Or is this something else? What does it remind you of? Looks like smoke, yeah. So maybe there's smoke. However, look at this. What are they? Poppies. Why is poppy showing up? So maybe poppies had to do with war, maybe it has to do with war art. So there's something speculating on that. But once again, art interpretation of multi-layered layers. But he also, of course, add a lot of interpretation based on these internal words. So there are different layers of art interpretation, as we can demonstrate here. Okay, this is basically the first gallery at give you an idea of Exhibit 7. Now, I'm not going to have a lot of time to spend with that. I just want to pay tribute to another Canadian artist. His name is Mary Pratt. And Mary Pratt is originally from Nova Scotia. Founding members of the Group of 7, counting Tom Thompson, the 8th. And because Frank Johnston left, replaced by A.J. Casson. So how many of them? How many? 9? Yes. And then after that, 9 of them, and they were formed in 1920s. In a few years' time, they were actually doing very well. People started to open up to the art. They were embracing the art of the Group of 7. So they kind of want to spread their wings a little bit. So they went to Montreal and invited Montreal artists to join the group. And his name is Edwin Holgate. And this is Edwin Holgate. He was the 10th member of the Group of 7. And you see that, I don't see that. This is not a very good presentation because it's not landscape. Yeah, because Edwin Holgate loved to paint portrait as much as landscape. He especially liked to paint his wife. So his wife is his muse and his model. So this was a painting his wife playing a cello. And later on the other side, you see he painted his wife with a turban. And it was also, and sometimes he painted landscape with people on it. And so at that time, Group of 7 opened up to like a different style of paintings. And so we have Edwin Holgate, the 10th, and I'm going to tell you the last member later on. Yes. I want to remind everybody the dark side of the curve. There's a reason why it's dark, because you're not supposed to cross over just in case you knock over any of the paintings. And also you maintain like a very optimum distance between you and the paintings. So just to remind you that. I want to give you a few names. Frederick Valley, another member of the Group of 7. He also loved painting portraits. This is a portrait painted by Frederick Valley. On my other side, as a landscape painter by Frederick Valley, just like Edwin Holgate, he loves sometimes put a person in the middle of a landscape, sometimes, but not all the time. But the way that he used color is so special. He especially embraced the color green because he believed that green is a very spiritual color. So when you paint a person, it's actually because the spirit came through this way. That's the same thing as landscape. So if you want to go into a gallery and spot Frederick Valley, that's the color scheme that you have to remember. And we have Frederick Valley, so he's once again a member of the Group of 7. Now, before we move to the next room, I know our people live up in the Arctic, okay? So when I was a kid, the Inuits, they were not called the Inuits. They were called the Eskimos. right? And the Eskimos, the people live up there, a very cold area. And then we changed the name. Actually, they changed the name because the name Eskimos were actually a word given by the settler up at the Arctic, saying that, because the word Eskimos actually means the raw meat eater. So they didn't actually like the word. I don't know whether anybody would like to associate their people with food. I don't know. So, but they didn't actually like that. So they now changed it to the word Inuit because the Inuit actually means the people. So for them, it has like a neutral meaning to it. So we call them the Inuit. That's the reason. And also, and I want to mention that because if you go down to the States and you go to museums, they still call, they still call the Eskimos. And it's not an insult to them, it's just they never change over to the name. And just as First Nations, we call the indigenous people First Nations, and in America, they still call them the Indians. So there's, and also there's crossover there. So just want to let you know. So Janet Nunnock is actually an Inuit contemporary artist. But her choice of medium is not canvas, it's not paint, it's actually needlework, needlepoint. And so in this room, you'll see that she was originally from the Bakelik area, which is an inland area, and she moved, belonged to the generation of the artists that she was born on the land. When she was born, they still lived in igloo, and they still very much spend their whole time outdoor. But in the 1950s, the Canadian government had the prefabrication houses set up, and they all moved into settlements. So now, if you go up to Nunavut and you go up to look at the Arctic, you'll see that the houses, and they live in the settlements. They have all the amenities that we have, just like people in the South. But however, there's still a very tough time making a living up there, and I was told that it still costs like $5 for a green pepper or something like that. So it's still a very hard way to make a living to actually stay up there. And Janet actually established her work based on her childhood experience. So even though later on she moved into settlements, she lived in the houses, she still had that good memory, this nostalgic memory of being a kid that lived in igloo and playing with her brothers on the snow. Now I want to bring it up because later on we're going to Maud Lewis, and Maud Lewis' artwork is also very nostalgic. It's also about the joyfulness of her life when she was a kid. Remember herself being a little kid and doing some kind of games, and around her you'll see animals, probably a dog, and canoes, and this Hudson Bay blanket representing the trading post up there. And she remember sleeping outdoor in tents in the summertime, and I was told that they still like to do that. Even in the summertime they have houses, but they still love to be close to the land. So they would set up tents, and then the whole family would move into the tents and to be closer to the land. And but then they said, what's going on? I kind of know what's going on down here. What's up there? These actually are little stories that she told. And she said when she was a little kid, she was told by her mother, just do a survey here. Anybody have seen Northern Light here? Northern Light? Yeah, you've seen Northern Light. And so those of you who have seen Northern Light, and you will understand the phenomenon. For those of you who haven't seen Northern Light, probably want to see them because it's a very exciting experience. And Janet, remember when she was a kid, and she always bugged her mom and said, I want to see the Northern Light. So her mom said it's very easy. What you have to do is to look up at the sky, look at the moon, and whistle. Then you will call the Northern Light phenomenon, and sometimes it actually works. So when the Northern Light showed up, she became very scared, and she went back to her mother, and her mother said, oh, if you want to calm the Northern Light, it's also very easy. You just have to put your hands together and rub them, and then you will kind of calm down the Northern Light phenomenon. So she said it was basically based on a story that her mom told her when she was a little kid. So she created that, she wrote a poem about that experience. She was a very poetic person, a very crafty, artistic person, and the way that she created art is about memories, it's about imagination, and she had a studio. She always closed herself in the studio, put on the music, and just herself and her artwork and the needles and the thread. And so all these are very joyous events, and I would like you to kind of browse around when we walk down and try to remember them when we walk into Maud Lewis' exhibition. There are a few pieces of artwork here. It's just for educational purpose because they were not actually done by Janet. They were beadworks. And some of you may be more familiar with the First Nations beadwork, but Inuit also embrace beadworks. And for example, the color, there's like thousands, hundreds of thousands of beads, and took months to do. And so these were actually not done by her, but it just show you the variety of the Inuit art. And this particular garment is called a mopi, and it's, once again, it's a lot of artwork, very elaborate, so it was made to be displayed in the museum. However, I want to talk about the shape of the garment, because this was actually a very practical garment wear by Inuit women. And you see the long tail, and of course they would not have all these beads and kind of impractical. And that kind of parka like that, they usually have made it using caribou skin. They would have two pieces of skin together, one inside out, one right side out, and to kind of trap the warmth. And then they would have this very long tail and this big hood. And there are some reasons behind. What's the reason of the hood? Of course, you can flip it up and be very warm. But there's another reason, is they like to carry their babies in their hood, right? And I was told that the babies usually lick it and just drop it into the hood, and then the skin of the animal will keep the babies warm. Now, the problem, back in the days when they did not have houses, they were nomadic people, they moved from places to places, they walk the baby, they nurse the baby, and then the baby need to be changed. What happened? Is it kind of cruel to put the baby on the snow? I think it is, right? So that's why they have this long tail and the coat. So they basically sit down on the ground, they wrap the tail of the coat to the front, so they can put the baby down and change the baby. So I think it was a very, very ingenious design. And so this, even though they have a lot of like modern technology in the clothing, just like we do, but some women still like to wear this traditional type of clothing up in the Arctic. So, but a contemporary group of 7 member, like a member of the, we go. So it's by a contemporary of the group of 7 called Emily Carr. Anybody heard of Emily Carr? Emily Carr is a West Coast artist. She was originally from Vancouver, from Victoria, BC. She was like the group of 7. She went overseas. She went to Paris to have her art education. The same experience with the group of 7. She came back to Canada. She went back to Vancouver, Victoria. Couldn't find a living, couldn't make a living being a painter. So she probably, for some of you, or more famous as an author. She was a very good writer. She wrote many, many books. And I recommended you, especially look up her illustrated book about her trips overseas. She went for different trips with her sister and herself, and she came back and wrote this, and she did the illustration herself. She was such a good writer, and I howled with laughter when I read those books. So she became a very good friend of Lauren Harris, and Lauren Harris encouraged her to paint again. Now, if I tell you, remember I talk about theosophy, the embracing of the energy of the land, the spiritual energy of the land. Now, if I tell you that Emily Carr also had the same kind of belief, you will say, this is very interesting, because for Lauren Harris, the mountainscape is all tranquil and silent, is embracing theosophy for some people. But Emily Carr is about the energy, it's about the rhythm, it's about what's going on in the forest. And I think there's a practical reason behind, because the landscape in BC is very different from the wilderness in Ontario. But on the other hand, she just feel the energy different, and she feel that the spirit of the land is very different compared to Lauren Harris. And this is a very fluid painting. It's the oil paint, the choice of medium, become very fluid, it become very light. And you know how she did that? The story was, Emily Carr decided to create that kind of energy of the forest. So she was set up, she was en plein air painter, she was set up in the forest, her easel with her stool, right? And then she decided to paint outdoor to capture the spirit of the land. And if I ask you, what is the biggest enemy if you paint outdoor for a painter? Bugs, yeah. Lauren Harris wrote that. Remember Lauren Harris' landscape, the tranquil, the simplistic line, the tranquility of the landscape. And he actually wrote that in one of his biographies that you have no idea what I was doing the whole time. I was painting with one hand, the other hand I was just keep doing that, and just to chase the bugs away. So it was the biggest problem as a painter. But Emily Carr had a new idea. She was a smoker, so she said, "Oh, that's easy. I would just chain smoke that would chase the bugs away. The problem was she didn't have a lot of money. So before she went to the forest to paint, she went to the butcher shop and said, "Can I get some of your wrapping paper?" So she took this brown wrapping meat paper to go to the forest. She sat down on the stool, but she didn't have money to buy turpentine to thin out her paint. So she used gasoline. Now this is back in the 1920s, so don't argue with me, the gasoline probably very expensive back then. I don't know how expensive is that, but she used gasoline to thin out her paint. So imagine chain smoking with gasoline right beside. You know the scientists say that don't smoke when you pump gas, right? So it was very lucky that she didn't kill herself at that time. So it was a miracle. Tom Thomson actually did not train as an academic painter. He went to school to learn to be a commercial painter, and he learned through talking to fellow painters and J.H. McDonald, and he shared an apartment with A.Y. Jackson at one point, and he was just a very adventurous painter. And you see that he kept using different colors. He was actually a very good colorist as well. Some people actually say that Tom Thomson invented a color for snow that never been done before. I don't know if it's true or not, but he definitely was very courageous in terms of using adventurous, right, in using color. And look at the salmon sky here, just reflecting the kind of feeling on the lens of the sunset. And look at this the reflection in the water. And it was just like spectacular. You see a Tom Thomson sketch and try to see how he played with horizon, how he put ups and down, how he dedicated space for the sky. Places for people to walk around here. It's an awkward position for me to stand, but that's okay. So Maud Lewis was born in 1909. I always forgot the year. 1903. She was born in 1903 in Nova Scotia. Now she's considered as a folk artist. Some people ask me, what's the difference between an academic artist and a folk artist? A folk artist basically didn't actually receive an academic art education, and she painted what she loves. She painted her homeland. She painted around her, and that's like in most cases, she painted Nova Scotia, rural life of Nova Scotia. Now, some people embrace Maud Lewis' work because she embraced joyfulness in her artwork. Now, I dare you, in the next few rooms, you want to think about the saddest thing in your life, and she gave birth to a child, and she was told by her family that the child was a boy and deformed and died during birth. So she never saw the child after she gave birth. But this is not an actual story, and for those of you who want to know, I'll tell you because I want to ruin the movie if you want to see the movie. But basically, she was told that, and so she had a hard time. She loved to go to have a drink in the evening in pubs, and she loved to dance. So in a couple years' time, her most beloved parents died. And her parents that looked after her, were very good to her and loved her, passed away. So she had to, and her brother decided to sell the family home. So she moved in with her aunt. Her aunt was a very nice lady, but a very restrictive and kind of authoritative kind of person. So she lived with her aunt, but she didn't get any freedom. She could not go out. She could not have a life. So she decided to look for a job. And in a corner store that's not too far from the house, she saw an advertisement one day. There was a local guy called Everett Lewis was looking for a housekeeper. So she took that ad down and talked to Everett. And Everett said, okay, you want to be my housekeeper, and that you have to come and live with me because you're going to cook, you're going to clean, you're going to look after my house. And she said, yeah, but I think she had a bad experience, but she said, I can't live with you if we're not married. So then, because she was in her 30s at that time, she decided to get married. So Everett Lewis married Maud, and so she became Maud Lewis. And the only problem is the house that was meant to be looked after was not actually a house per se, even though I know it's a very long time ago, but it was a very small footage house. It was 100 by 125 square feet. It was basically a shack. And there was no running water, no electricity, and no toilet. So, I don't know, never been to Nova Scotia, but it was winter time must be unbearable to live in a condition like that. And actually, she developed some kind, she had a juvenile arthritis when she was young, and it was developed into rheumatoid arthritis later on. So she had a lot of pain in her body, and it was just unbearable, a lot of pain and other deformity in her fingers. So she stayed in that house. She looked after it until she couldn't do it anymore because of her pain. So then she decided to pick up the art making, to continue to make postcards. But then she decided, oh, maybe I can do better. I can make bigger arts. So if you look behind you, there is a sign that was painted by Maud. So she said, well, maybe I can actually make paintings of regular size and sell it for better money. Now at that time, she was from the Digby area, Nova Scotia, and a lot of Americans love to go up there to use the cottages up there. So when she had this sign popped up near her house, a lot of people caught that. And the reason why is very obvious, because it was the house was so close to the highway. I was told when you drive by, you can throw something through the door of the house and you will reach the far wall of the house. So just basically very close to the highway. So she had this sign up, and she started doing paintings aside and behind you, and she was selling them. And a lot of people started to buy them, and a lot of them, believe it or not, Americans. And then they brought it down to the States, and one of the customers of hers was actually the chief of staff of the Nixon government. So he bought 2 paintings by Maud and brought it to the White House. So now Maud becomes more well known, and CBC actually did documentaries about her and wrote about her. You can actually Google, you can actually see the documentary as well. So she became a national name. But even though when she's a national name, she still sells the paintings that she painted for about $5 to $10, I was told.